Hello, everybody. Welcome to the XP Billionaires podcast, the RPG podcast of RPG podcasts. I know that's a lie, but I want you to believe it no matter what. I am Rafe Thegrim, as I usually am. You think after all of this time, I probably don't have to introduce myself or all of you, but at the same time, this could be your first episode. Who knows?
I like the whole, today I am. We'll see where I am tomorrow, but today I am.
That's a good point. All right, so yes, I am joined by the Mel Zerker, as you just heard, and the wonderful Sky Knight. Mel, you are also wonderful, just for the record. I don't know where that came from, but apparently I'm all over the place today.
Suck up.
A little bit. All right,
I won't complain.
All right, so let's see how everybody is doing today. As you can see, I am everywhere, so let's just move on to everyone else. Sky, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm fine. I'm comfy. I'm chill. Can't really ask for anything more. Yeah, ready to talk RPGs.
Huzzah! That's how everybody should be when they come to listen to the show. All right, Mel, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. At the moment, I'm just thinking about how some acronyms we try to sound out like a word, and some we just use letters. And it's just interesting, and that's all. I guess we couldn't call them RPGs. Wouldn't sound very good. That's all. That's what I'm thinking about.
I feel like we'd have to go with like RPEGs or something.
Ooh, RPEGs aren't bad. Like a JPEG.
Yeah.
Oh, yes! I might call them that now.
No one will know what you're talking about.
And I'm going to reference you so everyone can complain to you about it.
But you know what the best part of it all is? If it's an RPG about pirating, it's an RPEG.
RPEG.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, that opens up a whole bunch of options. Like if it's a strategy one, it's a SARPEG or a SIRPEG or okay, that's the only one I can think of right now. Why'd you put me on the spot like that?
What?
Because I'm a good friend. I'm a good friend, that's why.
All right, well, before we, divulge and go become like that much more chaotic overall, let's get into today's topic, I think. I think that's just safer for everybody.
Yes, please.
Practice safe RPing. Wait, RPGing. I can't do it. I already lost it.
RPegging. It's
Practice
RPegging.
safe. Now it sounds adult. Withdrawn.
I was gonna say you walked right into that.
Oopsie.
And the laughter lasted an additional 3 minutes. It was edited for time. All right. So RPGs tend to come in a variety of different worlds, many of which are imaginative and unique when it comes to story, setting, characters, that kind of thing. Now, there are a handful of RPGs out there that have created original stories in worlds that already exist. They can come from movies, TV, tabletop, books, you name it, whatever. There's lots of different options out there, lots of different media. So this week, I kind of want to discuss some of the games that are like that and what makes some of them so successful when others tend to be a letdown. So I guess we could get into my first question here that I want to bring around to the table. What medium do you think has been the most successful when it comes to making an RPG? And if you have examples for that, that would actually be really, really helpful. So, Mel, why don't we start with you this week?
Yes, I will take over the podcast. It will always be me first. So for me, and this is probably because of the librarian book nerd in me, it's all about books for me. I think because you get that mix of someone has created a narrative for you, but also you have to use your imagination, it really is the kind of thing that has the space to explore in games, which is really nice. And when you see a moment come to life and played out by like a really good actor or like really good voice acting, it's just like, wow, like it's just a really special kind of moment. It's nice too, you get generally have more time in a book or a book series to focus on what's going on. And I mean, I just listed a whole bunch of ones here that like stood out to me. My favorite is The Witcher and The Witcher. Pretty obvious ones there. Bioshock has a ton of Ayn Rand stuff in it. Bloodborne's got like a lot of Lovecraftian stuff in it. There's this really fun mobile game I like called 80 Days, and that's just flat out Jules Verne. I don't know, I think it's really interesting to explore some of these characters, but also concepts in games.
Just to be clear, Rafe, if you ever bring Bioshock into the house, now that I know this, I will set it on fire.
I'll just not download it because I'm pretty sure I got the BioShock collection for PS Plus at one point.
Probably.
At least I didn't pay for it.
This is true. Now, no offense to the developers or anything, but I mean, Ayn Rand is Ayn Rand, and Ayn Rand is the worst.
For sure. And the game's like, I mean, they're portraying a world where they're like, what if this was true? And then the answer is everything would be shit, which I kind of appreciate.
Okay, if it's subversive, I could possibly get into that.
Right? There's still some heavy-handed stuff. There's a lot of heavy-handed racism in the later Bioshocks, especially. And it's just kind of like, oh, like I know what you're doing, but it's still unpleasant.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I'll go a little bit more specific into that, and I would honestly say comic books would be one of the more successful ones based on my experiences. Like, I find that it's a lot easier to design a game around a comic book universe, just on the fact that there are so many different comic book universes of the same type out there already. Like, there's been, like, let's just take Spider-Man because it's the first one that comes into my head. You've got Amazing Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man, Web of Spider-Man, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. And this is just all the stuff I had when I was a kid. And all of the stories and all of the universes were very different. And they decided to kind of go their own way with the Spider-Man PS4 game. And that was excellent. Like, back at our streaming days, I did a full stream. I got through the whole main story of Spider-Man, and it was phenomenal. I mean, I was very mad at the ending, but that's for just story and general reasons, but had nothing to do with the actual game itself. Like, it was excellent. And then you've got this whole separate storyline they did with the Avengers game that came out, ignoring the fact that it's not a very good game as a game, but it was a lot easier to write a narrative for that because they didn't have to go on any existing source material. You could have a Marvel Cinematic Universe, a Marvel comic universe, a Marvel video game universe, if you will, if you really wanted to. Like, it just kind of brings everything into a style that can be all its own in its own medium.
I have only one thing to say. Marvel, why don't we have an X-Men RPG?
That is an incredibly good question. And if you're out there listening, somebody, please, I would love that. That would be wicked.
Wouldn't that be fucking amazing given how many characters exist in X-Men? All the potential options, the zillion storylines available. Like, why not? It would be perfect.
No, I completely agree. That would be just fantastic. If done right, of course. Gotta get the right studio for it. Don't know who that would be, but it doesn't matter. It just has to be done right.
Yes, it would be worse to have a bad one than none at all. I will say that.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Sky, what medium do you think is the best way to run it through?
Honestly, I'm going to go with the obvious one, tabletop games. Like, the whole video game RPGs, they're very rude. root is in tabletop RPGs, right? And ever since, there's been a million games based on various tabletop RPG systems. I mean, obviously, like, and Dungeons and Dragons alone, there's a million of them. I haven't played most of them, though I did play Neverwinter on PS4 once upon a time and had the sweetest ass-looking character. But that's a digression. But, you know, there's other ones. I know there's Pathfinder games. Torment Tides of Numenera was really good. And, you know, almost entirely lifted out of the tabletop system. So, honestly, I'm going to say it's the most successful. Considering how much cross-pollination there's already been and how many really well-loved games have their roots in tabletop ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've got a bunch of options here, so that's really nice, and it's nice that we didn't kind of all gravitate towards kind of the same thing too. So, yeah, no, that's great. That's very varietal. All right, so the next question I have: when an RPG is made from an existing source, would you rather the game be canon or a standalone adventure?
So I think in general, I prefer when things are canon. I like when things all connect and that they all kind of fold in together to create this larger narrative. I don't think it needs to be super in depth with the canon. Like, as long as it's kind of hitting the main points, I'm pretty happy to say, well, this happened 100 years earlier. This is, you know, can you give it a reason why it doesn't have all the other, you know, maybe characters that we know. But when it's completely standalone, it just doesn't feel like it's part of the greater thing. And I want that thing to be big. Like, I want there to be more canon for a thing I love.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, for me, like I actually will say that the opposite, and I think standalone adventures will be a little bit more interesting. But I mean, obviously, you have to at least build from some existing canon. So you know your characters have to be the same unless you're doing some sort of alternate reality or. But like you know, if you're using existing character material, they can't really be different from the characters in their original source. One game actually kind of stands out for me in that respect, and it's an old niche title from the PS2 era. It's called Inuyasha: Journey of the Cursed Mask. So basically, the way this story went is that you were a random Joe or Jane Schmo. You got to pick. You fall down the infamous well. You end up meeting the Inuyasha crew, and you go on this whole adventure throughout, and you just kind of deal with what's going on there. But that wouldn't really be possible without the original cast, you know, being pulled directly from their source material from a specific point in the series. But this story still doesn't happen. It's never mentioned in the anime. It's never mentioned in the overarching plot of the series. It's just kind of one and done. And then we take another game like MS Saga, which I know I've talked about on the show before. In this case, the only thing that they kept really canon was the Gundams themselves. So the mobile suits were just the iconic designs from the series, but they created a whole world and a whole universe around it as its own standalone universe. So there's still something connecting it to the franchise, but it's its own self-contained world. So for me, like the only time making a game canon like works 100% is if that was kind of the original plan in the first place. You know, kind of like the Dot Hack franchise, having anime to video games to anime to video games, having all of that kind of interconnected. That's a work of art, and I think that is fantastic. But all in all, that was kind of the planned route for the series. So I don't know. That's my take on it.
It does depend on the quality of writing and the ability to pick up references and little plot threads, offhand mentions from stuff that's already been created and spin it out into something, new and exciting. I mean, most cases of the words that come to mind is expanded universe, but not quite. But like a multimedia franchise that has, say comics and video games and whatnot. It can be done, but you have to have a strict hand on it. And, there needs to be quality control along the way. Cases like .hack are actually like really freaking rare, where that was the intention in the first place. Most cases, that's, those additional materials come out because whatever the initial property was so successful.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Sky, what do you prefer?
Both is good. I like stories to be part of the source's canon, but it helps if they stand alone enough not to alienate new fans or force old fans to be completely caught up with everything in the franchise. But, I mean, I like huge, sprawling, interconnected multimedia franchises. This is the stuff I live for. I live and breathe lore. It is my life. Now excuse me while I go sulk in the corner in former Star Wars fan.
Yeah. I know you're still kind of miffed over all of that, but
I will never not be miffed. But I mean, you can look at other things too. I mean, there's Suikoden, which itself has, on a much, much smaller scale, but, had later games in the series spun off from little details in other entries, in the early entries after the original creator left. There's cases like Sailor Moon, Another Story, which I'm not sure if it's considered officially canon, but it actually fits within the canon of the original Sailor Moon animes.
Mm-hmm.
It's in between two of the seasons. I always forget which ones. You usually remember.
S and Super S.
S and Super S. Thank you. Yes, that would make sense given who's in it. There's plenty of cases where you can look at where it's done successfully.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, let's have a little bit of fun to kind of cap things off. What existing franchise would you guys like to see an RPG made from?
Yeah, I'll jump on that. I'm going to talk about a book because I already mentioned how much I want books to be games. So this is a book that I am currently reading right now, and I am in love with it, and I want to play in the universe so much. It is called Legendborn by Tracy Dion. It's only the first book is out so far, but that just gives you more reason to start now. This game I can see being a very cool, not quite Persona game, but similar to Persona. So the lead in the series is a woman of color. She goes to this prestigious and primarily white college in the States, and she ends up joining this group, and all the people in the group are descendants of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. So I think there's lots of cool gameplay in that each of these people have their own special abilities based on the knight that they, like their ancestor was, which could be really, really fun to play. But also, like, this book just has a lot to say about, like, familial love and, like, what does it mean to have legacy? And there's, like, lots of questions that it prompts about, like, these group of primarily white men who can trace their lineage back to the 7th century. And, she only knows up to her grandmother. And I really like the way that this book doesn't shy away from that. It's got a couple really interesting different takes on magic, depending on how you use magic. And I just think it'd be really, really fun. And it also like deals with some real issues that I think we should talk about more.
Yeah, I've always liked kind of the concept where, in modern day, there people are something from myth or history or whatever. There's an old show I used to watch called The Almighty Johnsons, which I thought was fantastic. Basically, it was this family in New Zealand who ended up being the reincarnations of the Norse gods, and oh, it was hilarious. It was funny. It was smart. It was yeah. It was something really special. And if anybody has had a chance to watch it, I want to watch it again, and I think everybody should because it's really fun. But as for me, now I've been thinking about this for a while. I don't want to say that this was an RPG because it really was more of an action beat 'em up game with some light RPG elements. But what I want to see is a proper RPG, or even something like an RPG in the style of, say, Dragon Ball Xenoverse from the Kamen Rider franchise. For those of you who have listened to this podcast since days of old, I've mentioned the franchise before. I'm a huge fan. I've been loving it for over a decade now. I almost feel like it could have been longer, but at least a decade, if not more. But yeah, like they've done some Muso style games in Japan, which never made it over. There was a recent release of Memory of Heroes, which was an excellent game, even if it was fairly basic. But the storyline was fun, and it was visually really really awesome. But again, they weren't full on proper RPGs. So I think something like Dragon Ball Xenoverse, where you can mix the franchises, you can mix the series, give you better stages, big fights, big boss fights, that kind of stuff. I think it'd be really, really fun. Like, it doesn't need to have like a create a character structure. You start with the time traveling characters like Deno or Kamen Rider Zo, and then you would build a team and get more of them as you go. And I don't know. I think that would just be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's already set up for that, particularly with all the extra development that has gone into Deno because it was so popular that it spawned a bunch of movies. And and more recently Zio sort of adding to the time travel element, but also by bringing back Kamen Rider Decade to sort of also work with that traveling between worlds thing. So there's lots to work with. It's surprising they haven't actually done it already.
Oh yeah, I mean Bandai's done a bunch of mobile games, but that's really kind of as far as they've taken it at this point, and it's a shame. And the thing about it is that in the last year, the franchise is getting more and more mainstream in the West. We're actually seeing it available on certain streaming platforms. They're actually making a concerted effort to bring Kamen Rider to the West now, not the way Saban did, but at the same time, they're still like they're finally taking those steps. Now, those steps have gone a little farther recently with recent cease and desist notices that have gone out to fan subbers, which is really unfortunate. It's going to make getting the current stuff that much harder to watch now. But if Bandai and Toei are willing to release it in the West for us to actually get our hands on, I'm okay with that. I'm more than happy to support them when it comes out. But anyway, that's also a digression. So let's move on. Sky, what do you want to see come out as an RPG?
I actually wouldn't mind seeing something in the vein of the Throne of Glass book series by Sarah J. Maas. If you're not familiar with it, it's very easy to find. It's very popular. It's a very colorful yet dark young adult series, and it has a really strong female protagonist. Selena is gritty, angry, badass, and complicated and flawed, and she'd make a great video game protagonist. Or you could just use the setting. There's all sorts of crazy stuff in it. Everything from the giant spiders and the lots of magic, of course, a very very dark form of the Fae, that sort of thing. There's lots of monsters and antagonists to fight besides those as well, and lots of colorful potential allies they could flesh out and bring forward, as a cast, either specific characters or just, from various organizations and whatnot. And there's tons of political intrigue that could fuel an awesome plot. So, yeah. I mean, it would get an audience. And it's done now, so you don't have to worry about it not being finished. I can hear laughter in the background. Yeah, throw in a glass. Why not?
All right. Awesome. All right. So I think that's a good point for us to wrap things up. Yeah. So with all of the different opportunities out there, all the different mediums, all the different worlds, franchises, what do you guys want to see become an RPG that hasn't already happened? So let us know. You can message us through our email at xpbillionaires@gmail.com or hit us up on our social media. You can find me on Twitter at billionairesxp or Rafe Fegram on Instagram. Sky, where can everyone find you?
I'm at SkyKnightXP on Twitter and skyknight.xp on Instagram.
And Mel, where can everyone find you?
You can find me on Instagram at FemisGamer or Twitter at FemisGamer3. And you can check out on Twitch D4 Adventures, where I play a lovable goblin creature. I'm a human, but I act like a goblin.
A hublin, if you will.
I just like to eat things and collect pretty rocks. I mean, I think we can all agree that's the way to live.
Yeah, no argument.
And don't forget, xpbillionaires.ca is our one-stop shop for everything XP Billionaires. We've got quick-fire reviews, written pieces, the weekly RPG writing roundup. Check all of this stuff out, and that'll be available right at the main page. And there will also be links to any donation pages if you are interested in supporting us. So once again, check us out, xpbillionaires.ca. That's the place to be right now. All right, so that's going to be it for us this week. And just remember to make sure to take in all your favorite forms of media out there. But you got to make sure you keep gaming at some point, too. That's all we ask. All right, we'll see you next week.
Stay safe.
Bye-bye.